the inside story on the issues that affect you and your community. This is Local 12 Newsmakers.
I believe it is up to us as we reach a crossroads to decide if we will have the courage, if we will have the vision, if we will have the determination to make sure that our great state has renewed strength in this 21st century.
With an $8 billion budget shortfall and a very slow economic recovery, no one should be surprised that Governor Kasich and the legislature are struggling to find a way to balance the next biennium budget. But what is surprising are some of the fault lines inside the Republican Party, which holds the governor's office and majorities in both houses. Good morning and welcome to Local 12 Newsmakers. I'm Dan Hurley. The Ohio House of Representatives has adopted and sent to the Senate for debate a $56.6 billion budget bill that seeks to balance through a combination of cuts to local government, K-12 schools, Medicaid, and lots of other areas. In combination with a privatization of 5 state prisons and 1 juvenile facility, and the state liquor system, and the turnpike to generate new funds. To talk about where the budget process is headed, I am joined this morning for the entire show by Republican Senator Bill Seitz of Greene Township. Senator Seitz has served in local government as a township trustee and a member of the Cincinnati Board of Education. He served 7 years in the Ohio House and has been in the Ohio Senate since 1907, having been elected in 2008. In 2007, not 1907. Columbus Monthly Magazine has recognized him as the best and funniest speechmaker in state government and a great command of the facts, which makes him one of my favorite people to interview here on Newsmakers. Bill, welcome back to Newsmakers.
Great to be with you, Dan.
Let's begin with what's sort of perking in the news right now, and that's the whole question of where we stand with the casinos. So Governor Kasich has now been insisting on a change in the way that taxes are calculated, which has resulted in delays, and now we've got an empty lot down there because there's been a stall in the whole construction process, called a halt to it. What's your reaction to this?
The casino issue was approved by the voters and was very detailed. It was written by the casino operators themselves. That initiative, unfortunately for the casinos, very clearly said they would pay any reasonable and non-discriminatory tax that any other business in Ohio paid. Since February 2010, I have alerted the casinos to the fact that the commercial activities tax, also known as the CAT tax, is a gross receipts tax in Ohio, and that they may have a problem because gross receipts mean everything that you take in. So whereas the casino folks thought they would pay the CAT tax only on the amount remaining to them after they pay the winning bettors, a gross receipts tax doesn't work that way. It is not a profits tax, it is a receipts tax. So every time a token is put into the slot machine or a $5 chip is put on the pass line at the craps table, that, I believe, counts as a receipt. So we have had this issue on the table since February 2010. That is the issue. The casinos, I believe, are willing to sit down and recognize, for practical reasons, that they cannot live that way because it would make the working of the games impossible. So I think they would be willing to pay some additional amount of money to Ohio to get an exemption from the CAT tax so that they pay it only on what's left after the winning bettors are paid. Governor Kasich, instead of sitting down and negotiating that with them, has instead said, I want to hire some experts to advise me, and he's a new governor, he's got that right. But this dangerous game of chicken is now coming to a head, and I think most of us would like to see it resolved in the next few weeks, and I believe it will be resolved in the next few weeks.
What part of this, last year when this whole thing was on the ballot as a constitutional amendment, which by the way I thought was a silly way to do this.
I agree.
And a bad way to do it.
I agree.
But be that as it may, it passed. But part of that discussion then was that the way this was structured by the casino interest and political advisors they had was that the money that generated was going to go primarily to local governments, not to the state. I mean, that was a conscious decision.
That's right.
That we talked about. And two things on that. One is that Kasich's now trying to come back and say, wait a minute, I want something. Oh, and two, why doesn't he use this politically to say, I'm cutting the amount of state aid to local governments, but you're going to get this new casino money? It seems politically ham-handed.
I think, as I said, it's a dangerous game of chicken. The money from the casinos is really not going to flow to local governments and schools until the casinos are up and running.
Right. And
the fact of the matter is that will not provide any short-term relief to local government or schools over the next period that we're budgeting for. It will in the future. So the idea that local government is being cut now and that can somehow be made up for by casino revenue, that's only true eventually. That's not true in the near term. I'm more concerned about the delays in construction, because when we delay construction, we're putting off the day when that revenue can benefit local schools and local governments. This cat tax issue, though, is a real issue. I'm the one that came up with it. I reviewed their amendment. They wrote their amendment. They could have written an exemption. The reason I know I think I have something to talk about is when we passed the cat tax in '05, the horse racing tracks said, oh my God, if we don't get an exemption, we will have to pay it on everything bet at the racetrack windows without any credit for what we pay the successful bettors. And so I said, you're right. So we wrote an exemption for the racetracks, but only for the racetracks, that define gross receipts for them as that which remains after the winning bettors are paid. That exemption doesn't apply to casino gaming, so I told the casino folks way back in February 10, because I'm a very upfront guy, I said, listen, I'm all for casinos, but Houston, you have a problem, and you, I think, failed to consider this possibility.
So you think this is going to be negotiated out before it goes to court? Or do you think it's going to end up in court?
No, I think this will be negotiated out. I'm hopeful that both the casinos, who have so much invested in the project already, and the governor, who certainly doesn't want to be responsible for stopping $1 billion worth of new construction and all the potential future revenues we'll get, both sides are going to realize that prolonging this very public squabble is in no one's interest, and hopefully they will sit down and come to some reasonable solution. We need a Henry Kissinger to come in and negotiate a fair and equitable solution to this very interesting tax question.
About casino money, pardon me, but okay, anyway. How would you, let's take a step back. How do you personally look at the overall budget that's now before you, that's come through the House and is now before you in the Senate?
Well, I'm delighted at a 50,000-foot level that we are able to come up with a balanced budget without raising income taxes, sales taxes, property taxes. That's quite an achievement when you look at the $8 billion cliff, roughly 16% of the previous budget. We have to find a way to balance that, because the federal stimulus money that we used 2 years ago to balance that budget has now come to an end. And so we faced an $8 billion vertical cliff through a combination of very good ideas, long overdue ideas, such as increased privatization, such as giving local governments more options, reduced public notice requirements, encouraging shared services, increased experimentation with school choice. All of these things will help to reduce cost. Those are good ideas. And some other very controversial ideas, like outright reductions in local government aid and a very tough school budget for the public schools. Those are problem areas, but on the whole, the House did balance the budget without raising taxes. That's a good thing.
So let's talk about the privatization stuff a little bit. In the area of economic development, it has basically, what happened is that by and large gotten off of the state books because it's being turned into a private entity, which will raise its own money. Is that, am I correct on that?
Not quite. We, a few months ago, created a private nonprofit corporation run by the governor through a board that he picks called Jobs Ohio.
Right.
We created that. In this budget, we are now proposing that that entity be the entity that receives all of the state's liquor profits for the next 25 years. That is an amount that will, over time, probably be $7 or $8 billion. In return, Jobs Ohio will sell bonds and give the state $1.2 billion for the right to receive that $7 billion over 25 years. The question is, what's Jobs Ohio going to do with that $7 billion? We need to make sure there are plenty of safeguards that they don't use this pot of money simply to reward political friends of this or a future governor, and we need to be very certain that we provide appropriate parameters for what they can spend it on. But yes, the idea is they will then take over many of the functions now undertaken by the Department of Development and play a major role in job creation by matching that money from liquor profits with private venture capital and hopefully give us something to sell for jobs and economic development in Ohio.
And the governor is going to be the head of that board,
yes,
right?
The governor chairs the board. He's the sole member of the corporation. And so when I say we need these safeguards, Dan, I'm not speaking against this governor. Remember, this corporation will be out forever. And when Governor Kasich's no longer there, we have to think about what some future governor could do.
So what safeguards would you like to have?
Well, I want safeguards on what they can invest in. I want safeguards on whether they can retransfer this $7 billion asset to some friend of Joe out there somewhere. We can't be having that. I want to be sure that that the state is getting a fair price for giving up the right to these profits. I want to be sure that the state will continue to enforce the liquor laws. I don't want private enforcement of the liquor laws. I don't want Jobs Ohio to decide what brands of liquor are going to be sold in Ohio stores. That should remain a state function. So we're trying to determine what functions properly remain with the state and what Jobs Ohio should be doing.
So does the state liquor operation, it's being privatized, or it's just its profits are going?
Essentially, it's its profit stream that's going.
So it still will be owned by the state?
That's correct. The state will own it, and for 25 years, Jobs Ohio will have the irrevocable right to the profits from that.
Okay.
That's about $228 million a year, and the trend line is going up.
Would there have been another approach to that, which would just sell off this system that Ohio has and privatize the system itself? Would there have been more money involved?
That would have been another approach, but you would lose an awful lot of control, and I'm not sure I would want all of those decisions being made by a private entity. What if, for example, one liquor company bought that, and then they would use that market power to favor their products over anyone else's products?
Very quickly on privatization, you have any problems with the prison part of this?
Well, again, I have, the devil is in the details on all these things. It's a good idea because we have 2 privately operated prisons now, and we have for the last 11 years. Each year, they have to prove to the state's satisfaction that they save money compared to what it would cost the state to run those same facilities. They've done it for 11 years in a row. So the idea that we could perhaps go down this road at 5 other facilities is not a bad idea. In this area, Governor Kasich is actually proposing the sale of those 5 prisons, and I want to be sure that if that private operator doesn't work out, we have the right to get those prisons back without having to pay through the nose because the cost
the property itself is leaving.
The cost of new construction of prisons is astronomical, and so if the private operator doesn't work out, doesn't fulfill their promises, I want the right through a reverter clause in the deed to get that property back at a reasonable price so they cannot hold the state hostage.
Is there a buyer out there already?
That will be conducted through a request for proposal process.
So in effect, when that takes place, the state will pay that operator to house.
Yes, that's right.
We'll still be paying. There will still be a prison cost in our general budget, but it will just be hopefully lower and whatever.
Yes, that's the idea, and the reason why it can be lower is because these folks still have to have all the same training of state prison guards, still have to follow all the state standards for running a prison, but typically their salaries are less than what the salaries are of the folks that work directly for the state. Their pension costs are less, and so therefore there is an opportunity for some modest savings through private operation.
I know, because of just how we have to split the show up here. I'm going to go to a break now, and then we're going to come back. You just stay right there.
Okay, great.
Stay tuned. Bill Seitz is staying with us, and there's a lot of things still to discuss about the state budget, so we'll be right back. Welcome back. I am joined this morning by Senator Bill Seitz from Greene Township, who is with us to talk about the Ohio budget, which is now before the Ohio Senate, having already been, the first version, having already been passed by the Ohio House. Bill, we've been talking about some privatization issues, the casino. I want to move on. You mentioned that there's a couple really tough areas here. You used to be a member of the Cincinnati Board of Education. When you look at the cuts on schools, in combination with, this is the part that really gets me, is that Governor Kasich has indicated that people shouldn't pass local levies to make up for these cuts because that'll just discourage business. But don't weak schools also discourage business from expanding or moving into our area?
Well, I think a strong education system is key to our state's future success and any other state's success. I don't have a problem with cutting aid to the schools to the extent that they relied on federal stimulus money that is now gone. We can't give them what we don't have. But the governor's budget proposal for K-12 schools actually goes well beyond merely cutting the amount that they received in federal stimulus money. Under his proposal, some of our local school districts, particularly in the suburbs, were getting cuts in state aid of 50, 60, 70, or in the case of Indian Hill, 100% of state aid. I believe that we need a strong partnership between state aid, local levy support, and a good public school system. And what keeps the good public school system honest is a vibrant system of parochial schools, private schools, and community, also known as charter schools. That provides the competition that will help keep the public schools nose to the grindstone on spending money efficiently. So I am concerned that the governor's budget made pretty deep cuts in public schools, even as it took steps to further expand our community school network and our vouchers for underprivileged folks to go to Catholic school. So that was good, but the cuts to the public schools were a little too much. The House recognized that. They restored an appreciable amount of money. They provided a provision that no one could lose more than 20% of their state aid. That's a step in the right direction. I hope we're able to improve upon that, and there's a ready way to do it. If the governor would move forward with slot machines at the racetracks, something that Governor Strickland proposed 2 years ago, something that Governor Kasich has the power to do tomorrow by executive order, that would provide about $500 to $800 million in additional money for K-12 schools, because it's constitutionally earmarked that way, yet in this 2-year biennium that we're budgeting for. So I see the problem. I have a solution. Again, it depends on the governor's willingness to recognize this ready source of non-tax revenue.
Has he indicated any interest in that?
He has said he is studying the issue. He's giving us the same answer on that he gave to the casinos. I have hired experts and I am studying the matter. I think time's a wasting. This is an issue that those of us that have been in state government for 10 years no, there is no reason to study this for another year. The fact of the matter is, this is something that we need to move forward with as a matter of survival for the horse racing industry in Ohio, and as a way of recognizing non-tax revenue that can help our schools meet a very real and present problem of draconian cuts that are being administered to them at the state level.
Do you think those draconian cuts are out of some analysis of the budget, or are they out of ideology in a way combined with Senate Bill 5 of punishing teachers?
Well, you'd have to ask. I'm not a psychiatrist. I do believe that too many of my colleagues have suddenly decided that public sector workers are the blue plate special at the diner today. And while I never denied that we need sweeping reforms in collective bargaining, while I never denied it, in fact, have actively pursued getting our pension funds back into actuarial solvency, I think that some of my colleagues have taken this way too far, and that public sector workers are, generally speaking, married to or have family who are private sector workers. So this little plan, if there is one, to pit private sector middle class workers against public sector middle class workers, in my judgment, won't work. The fact is, we're all in this together. We're all suffering. We just don't need to single out for the whipping boy status our cops and our firemen and our teachers and our professors. They do a good job too, the vast majority of them.
And I know and I don't want to get into the details of re-arguing SB 5,
right.
And you've argued that this has all kinds of political implications, that it went too far, and
right.
now there's a petition drive going on to repeal it. And I want to take a look at some of the political implications of that. First off, if you were offered that petition, would you sign it?
Well, I have been offered the petition, and I did sign it. Having opposed the bill, I would be a hypocrite not to sign a petition to allow the people of the state of Ohio to weigh in on the bill, because that is the only way at this point that my position can be vindicated. So yes, I did sign it. I'm sure some people aren't happy about that, but I do believe in the First Amendment, and I exercised my First Amendment right to sign that petition.
So you think it's better, even though I know you didn't like SB 5 at all, but you wanted reforms, if this now gets repealed, it doesn't necessarily open up the chance to do the sort of reforms that you want. It may just put this whole thing behind us for another 10 years.
It may, and that's one of the reasons why I counseled my colleagues against overreaching in the first place. In the 90s, when Republicans controlled state government, passed a workers' comp bill that many people believe went too far. That went to the ballot. It was repealed. The legislature showed no inclination to get back into that issue for 8 years. When we got back into the issue in 2005, we took a different approach. I sat down personally with the dean of the plaintiffs' work comp lawyers and one of the deans of the defense work comp lawyers, and over a dinner we hashed out a compromise bill that didn't go to referendum and is still on the books today. That's the approach that we should be taking.
Okay, that's the approach you think we should be taking. And we just talked about this petition drive, and that's sort of the macro thing. Let's talk about the personal thing. Mm-hmm. How much has that fight cost you influence in Columbus with Tom Niehaus, the president of the Senate, and a good friend of yours, and with Governor Kasich, who you've been pretty blunt about your feelings about him, to lose the Dirty Harry Act, and you're no shrinking violet yourself. What's your influence at this point?
Well, I think people will have to judge that for themselves. My first job is to represent my constituents. What does it cost me? It's cost me, for starters, $6,500. I am the only member of the Senate that does not chair a committee or vice chair a committee or ranking minority member on a committee, and who serves on only 2 committees. I'm down to only 2 committees because the Senate president threw me off of 2 committees. Right. And I firmly believe that's all about my position on Senate Bill 5. He'll deny that, but that's a debate
there's no
for another
question
day.
about it.
Well, he would deny it.
He needed the vote.
Well, that might be, but then he threw me off the other committee after the vote. So one was because we needed the vote, and one was because we took the vote. But the fact of the matter is, look, my job is to represent my constituents. My mail has been running 100% in favor. Even the people that disagree with me on Senate Bill 5 respect the fact that I had reasons for what I did, that I was not an opponent of reform, and that I had the courage to vote my conscience. And I think that's what we need. And if that means that they can play this little junior high student council game and kick Senator Seitz off committees and take away his chairmanship and cost him $6,500, if that's how they think they want to play the game, then I have no choice but to continue representing my constituents. I'm not going to change that position, period.
Well, you know, with the on the budget side of this, it's SB 5, because it's now probably going to the ballot, is not directly related to the budget, but it seems to me some of the things I read say that it's being written into the budget, or the assumptions are being written into the budget. Is that correct?
Well, to some extent, some of the underlying assumptions are written into the budget because the governor has proposed cutting aid to local governments by 50%. And when challenged about why so deep a cut, one of the responses that I've heard is, well, Senate Bill 5 will allow you to cut salaries. It will allow you to take health care bargaining off the table. It will take away longevity pay, step increases, give you the right to handle your workforce as you would like to manage to the resources that we're making available to you. So yes, very much. The assumptions are underlying Senate Bill 5 are part of the budget. The actual language of Senate Bill 5 is not in the budget bill. There are a few provisions dealing with teacher pay that we're looking into to see if they do mimic Senate Bill 5 and if they really need to be in there, but they did not put Senate Bill 5 itself into the House-passed version of the budget, and I would hope that we would keep it that way.
Okay, there's so much more we could talk about, but we're out of time. And thank you for being here. It is so much fun to talk to you because you know all the pieces and how they fit together.
Great being with you.
Thank you for being making Newsmakers a part of your Sunday morning. Join us again next week to meet the men and the women shaping our community for the future. Have a great week.